When I set about turning our guest room from this into this, I realized that the headboard was not matching the vibes. So I decided to bulk it up and sew it a linen slipcover. So I'm trying to bulk up this headboard that came on this bed. It's just a simple unfinished wood, and I want to wrap it and make it upholstered, but I'd like it to be thicker. So I bought this wood that I'm going to attach around it to make it thicker and also to square out these corners. And then I'm going to wrap it in batting and sew a cover for it. I marked where to cut my side pieces and my top piece, making sure to include the extra width added by the new sides when marking the top piece. I did not bother to miter the corners because it won't matter. So I flipped this headboard over because this is the back, and I want the width to be protruding out the back. And I'm just gonna brad nail it on. Okay. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect because it's getting covered, but let's see how it goes. And just like that, we've squared it off. It's not completely flush, but it's good enough. All right, I'm gonna cut a bunch of lengths of this so that I can stack together and wrap around the headboard. I went with cotton batting instead of foam, even though the foam would have created a more structured shape, but mainly because I wanted to use a natural product like cotton and avoid a synthetic foam product. I stacked and smoothed all 8 layers before laying the headboard on top face down. I folded the sides around and made sure to keep it tight as I stapled it to the back of the headboard, tight against the trim piece. Then I did the same on the other side. I am not an expert, so I was sort of winging it on the corners. I knew I would need to cut the bulk of it out in order to make a tight corner. I tried to cut the batting on an angle toward the corner so that it would lay nicely without too much overlap on the back. Then I trimmed more where it seemed too bulky. I probably should have left a little more in the corner here to fold in. Oops. Well, that is not a pretty corner. Now I need to cut around the area that gets screwed in. Here I am cutting the batting back to expose the screw holes where the headboard will attach to the bed frame when it's screwed back together. Then I stapled across the front of the headboard above where I needed to cut in order to expose the part that will need to be flush with the bed frame when it gets screwed back together. Okay, all right, now to make the slipcover. I chose an upholstery weight linen for my slipcover. I cut the front and back to fit the new headboard dimensions, plus extra for seam allowance. Then I cut 3 separate 3-inch strips for the top and the sides, rather than cutting one long continuous piece, because I thought that would make it easier to line up when I sewed it all together, and it would make a nice defined corner for the finished slipcover. I also rough cut some strips to make my own piping. I bought some piping cord from the fabric store, but I realized it wouldn't be enough, so when I was at the hardware store, I saw this roll and bought it for a fraction of the price. $3.50 for 5 meters at the fabric store versus $9 for 50 meters at the hardware store. If this piping were being sewn on something curved, I would have cut it on the bias, but it will be straight, so I didn't cut it on the bias. I did sew the strips together on an angle to make them less bulky though. Here I am forgetting how to make a straight strip with an angled seam. I worked it out. There we go. Then I ironed the seams flat, wrapped it around my piping cord, and sewed my piping using my zipper foot. Next, I laid my front piece out over the headboard, and I lined up the piping along the edges, pinning it with the raw edge outward. Then I pinned the side piece around the headboard, sandwiching the piping between the front and the side piece. Okay. This is the point where everything is still going well. We'll see if that lasts. I put my zipper foot back on my machine and I sewed them together. I pulled the front half of the slipcover over the headboard to check the fit. Then I flipped it over and pinned the back on the same way, sandwiching the piping in between as I went. You can see I cut into the piping as it rounded the corner to help it bend. Then I pulled it off very carefully and sewed the back on. After I checked for fit, I trimmed all the excess fabric along the seam so it would not be bulky when I fit it to the headboard, and I hemmed the bottom of the slipcover. I did a double row of stitches to give it a sturdy finish. Once I was happy with the fit, I used a pencil to mark where the screw holes were, and I made buttonholes on the front and back where each screw would go through the headboard. I used my machine's buttonhole presser foot and settings. I chose to do it this way so it would help keep the slipcover nice and tight over the headboard, even though I knew it would mean I would have to remove the headboard if I wanted to clean the slipcover. I figured I wouldn't be doing that very often and it would be worth it to have a nice tight fit. And here is the finished headboard. I then made a matching bedskirt with a box pleat corner. I definitely think the headboard and bedskirt match the vibe of the room now. What do you think? To see how the whole room came together, watch this video and tell me what you think. Thanks for watching.